Camp Pendleton, California, summer of 1972. The Pacific sun beat down mercilessly on the western edge of the base, turning the concrete training yard into a shimmering mirage. The air felt thick and heavy, carrying the sharp smells of sweat, rubber mats, and machine oil that drifted out through the open doors of the big base gymnasium. It was a wide, industrial building the Marines had turned into their own cathedral of discipline. Heavy steel racks held hundreds of pounds of iron. Punching bags hung from ceiling hooks, swaying slowly like patient pendulums. The floor was that familiar institutional green, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered just a little, almost like they could feel the tension building in the room. It was late afternoon. Most of the enlisted men had already finished their training for the day, but the gym wasn't empty. In one corner, 3 big Marines sat on a bench, their arms thick as ship ropes. They watched the door with that easy, superior confidence that only very strong men in top shape seem to carry naturally. One of them was laughing and mimicking a karate chop with exaggerated mocking movements. The others chuckled along. Near the center of the room, a woman trained alone. Her name was Sergeant Diana Holloway. She was 26 years old, 5'9", and 147 pounds of lean, battle-conditioned muscle. She had been one of the first women to push through the advanced hand-to-hand combat training at Pendleton. During her 3rd week, she had accidentally broken an instructor's wrist. The story spread through the base like wildfire, growing a little bigger with every retelling until some people swore she had broken both arms. Diana never bothered correcting them. That afternoon, she was working the heavy bag with sharp jab cross-hook combinations. Each punch landed with a clean, cracking sound that echoed off the walls. She had fast hands. She had trained boxing under a retired Golden Gloves fighter. Her grip was so strong that a sergeant major once tested it and then refused to talk about the results. And on this particular day, Diana was in a certain kind of mood, cold, focused, the kind of mood where the only honest conversation left in the world is the one you have with the bag. She had been at it for about 40 minutes when the side door of the gymnasium opened. A man walked in. He was small. That was the first thing anyone noticed. In a room built for big Marines, in a world of standard military bodies, this man looked almost delicate. He carried a simple gym bag over one shoulder. He wore a plain white t-shirt and black training pants. No insignia. No rank. Just a civilian visitor pass clipped to his collar, meaning someone important had cleared him, processed him, and brought him to this exact building. He was Chinese, or of Chinese descent. At Camp Pendleton in 1972, that alone was enough to turn 3 heads from the bench in the corner. Their expressions said everything words didn't need to. The man set his bag down near the wall. He stretched his neck, rolled his shoulders, and looked around the room with quiet, unhurried attention, the look of someone who is rarely surprised but always curious. His eyes moved from the equipment to the bags, and then settled on Diana. They stayed there for a moment, not with challenge, not with admiration, just the private recognition of someone who sees real quality and quietly acknowledges it. He stood 5'7" and weighed about 138 pounds. His name was Bruce Lee, and nobody in that gym, not Diana Holloway, not the 3 men on the bench, had any idea who he was. Now, before we go any further, stop for a second and ask yourself something honest. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever walked into a room, a job, a competition, or a tough situation and watched someone look at you and silently write you off? Have you ever felt that burning feeling when someone decides who you are before you've even opened your mouth? If you have, then what happened in the next 11 minutes inside that hot gymnasium isn't just a story about Bruce Lee. It's your story too. It's the story of every person who ever had to prove something to someone who wasn't paying close enough attention to learn it on their own. Stay with me until the end, because those 11 minutes, second by second, will change how you think about strength, size, and what it really means to be dangerous. Captain Stokes had given Bruce permission to use the gymnasium that afternoon to train and decompress before driving back to Los Angeles. Bruce hadn't expected anyone else to be there. He crossed the floor to an open area near the far wall and started warming up. His warm-up was nothing like anything Diana or the 3 Marines on the bench had ever seen from a man of his size. He moved through a series of stances and transitions that flowed smoothly from one into the next, like water. No pauses. No resets. Just constant, controlled, effortless motion. His footwork was something special. He seemed to arrive in one position and already be leaving it before the movement finished, so watching him felt slightly disorienting, like trying to focus on a reflection in moving water. The 3 Marines on the bench stopped laughing. One of them, a big corporal named Davis, 260 pounds of solid muscle who looked like he'd been built from construction materials, leaned over and said something low to the others. They smiled the kind of smile that usually comes right before a bad idea. But it was Diana who moved first. She had stopped hitting the bag. She stood watching Bruce with the focused expression of someone who wasn't sure what she was looking at. In her experience, and she had plenty, people who moved like that were either very good or just putting on a show. She needed to know which one this was. She walked straight across the gym toward him. Bruce noticed her when she was still about 15 feet away. He didn't stop moving. He didn't change his pace. He simply acknowledged her approach with the same calm attention he had given the whole room when he first walked in. She stopped about 6 feet from him. "You know how to fight?" she asked. It wasn't aggressive. It was a straight professional question, the kind a serious trainer asks to figure someone out. Bruce stopped and looked at her. He smiled. Not a mocking smile. Not a nervous one. Just the smile of a man who had been asked that question many times in many different rooms and still found it genuinely interesting. "A little," he said quietly. His voice was calm and light, with only the faintest trace of an accent. He had spent years in the United States by then, teaching, talking and debating philosophy with students and masters, so his English was clear, thoughtful and warm. "I've been training for 8 years, Diana told him. Hand-to-hand, boxing, some judo." "That's a long time," Bruce replied. "Long enough to know the difference between dancing and fighting," she said. There was no cruelty in her words. It was simply an honest test. Bruce nodded slowly. His eyes stayed on hers. He was reading her, not with suspicion, but with the quick, deep attention that truly exceptional martial artists develop after years of having to size someone up in seconds. "You're good," he said. "I watched you on the bag." Diana didn't thank him. She wasn't looking for compliments. "What are you practicing?" she asked. "Something I'm still building," he answered. "It doesn't have a complete name yet." That caught her interest. Not enough to impress her yet, but enough to make her curious. From the bench in the corner, Corporal Davis called out loudly, "Hey, you going to show the lady some moves?" The other 2 laughed, the kind of laughter that's more about marking territory than anything funny. Diana didn't look at them. Bruce didn't either. "Would you like to work together?" she asked. "Nothing full contact, just controlled." Bruce tilted his head slightly. He considered her request for a couple of seconds, not because he was unsure, but because he was deciding what this moment called for. "Yes," he said simply. They moved to the center of the mat. Now pay close attention, because what happened next is the part of this story that combat veterans, martial arts instructors and trainers have been retelling for decades. It wasn't a fight. It was a lesson, and every single second mattered. They faced each other on the mat with about 6 feet between them. Diana had 3 inches of height on Bruce and about 9 pounds more weight, but those numbers didn't tell the full story. Her size came from years of hard military conditioning. She was as physically ready as any Marine in her position could be in 1972. Bruce stood in a way Diana had never seen before. His weight was perfectly balanced, not leaning back, not pushing forward, just centered in a way that looked almost impossible. His arms hung loose at his sides, feet a little wider than his shoulders, knees softly bent. He looked completely relaxed. To an untrained eye, he looked unprepared. Diana settled into a solid boxing stance, orthodox, weight slightly back, hands high and tight. It was technically excellent. Anyone who knew boxing would have respected it right away. Bruce didn't match her stance. He just stood there with that same loose, centered calm. Diana threw the first controlled jab, not full power but real enough to test him. A sharp, educated punch with good extension. It hit empty air. In the fraction of a second it took for her jab to travel, Bruce had shifted sideways just a few inches. Not a big dramatic move, just a smooth weight transfer. The jab passed through where his face had been, and Diana felt the miss in her shoulder before her mind fully caught up. She reset and threw the cross. Her power hand, the punch she had broken equipment with and impressed every trainer she ever worked with. Clean mechanics, real intent. Bruce wasn't there anymore. He had shifted the other way with that same subtle movement. The cross sailed past. She felt him close behind her left shoulder for a split second. Then he was back in front of her, standing calm and balanced again. He hadn't broken a sweat. He hadn't even seemed to hurry. The laughter from the bench had completely stopped. Diana was good enough to recognize what she was facing. She was also honest enough with herself to admit it. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't luck. This was someone who lived in a different relationship with time and space than anyone she had ever trained against. She pushed the thought aside and kept going. She feinted with the jab and committed to a left hook to the body. Bruce's right hand made a small, calm, circular motion, almost like gently stirring something, and redirected her hook. Not a hard block, just a redirection. She felt the lightest touch on her forearm, and suddenly her own punch was carrying her slightly off balance. She recovered quickly. Her breathing was getting harder now, not from physical effort, but from pure concentration. She tried a front kick, clean, direct, aimed at the midsection. In boxing terms, it was like a jab with her leg, testing, gathering information. Bruce stepped inside it, not away, inside. He moved toward the kick as it launched and slipped past it so smoothly that by the time her foot reached full extension, it was already behind him. She was exposed for a moment. She knew it. She brought her guard up and pivoted fast. He was standing right where he had started. He hadn't moved more than 3 feet in any direction the whole time. His breathing was steady. His shirt hadn't even shifted. Diana stood still for a moment. She wasn't angry or humiliated. She was frustrated in the way a scientist gets frustrated when an experiment shows a result that shouldn't be possible according to everything she thought she knew. She lowered her hands. "How are you doing that?" she asked. And this is where the moment changed. Bruce didn't smile like he had won. He didn't look satisfied or superior. He simply stepped forward and held out his right hand, palm up, the quiet gesture of a teacher inviting someone to come see something interesting. "Stand here," he said gently. She did. "Try to push my hand straight back," he told her. Diana placed both her strong hands against his palm and pushed with real effort, the effort of someone who had been tested and refused to back down. She had powerful arms built from years of training. His arm bent slightly at the elbow, then redirected her force. Not resisted it, not blocked it, just redirected it. She felt herself pushing past him, around him, her own power turning into a useless circle that went nowhere. Like pushing against water, the water simply moves and closes behind you. She stepped back, surprised. "You were fighting me," Bruce said. "That's what we agreed to do," she answered. He shook his head softly. "No. You were fighting the idea of me. You were fighting my size, my appearance. You had already decided what I was capable of before the first punch, and because you decided that, every time I did something outside that picture, your body hesitated for a fraction of a second to recalculate. And that fraction of a second," he paused, "is everything." She finished the thought for him. "Is everything." He nodded. In the middle of that hot gymnasium at Camp Pendleton, something shifted inside Diana Holloway. It had nothing to do with losing a fight. It had everything to do with seeing clearly for the first time. She had made an assumption, a small reasonable one that the human mind makes every single day. He is small. He is unfamiliar. He is less than what I'm prepared for. That quiet assumption had beaten her before the first punch was even thrown. Not Bruce's speed, not his technique. Her own picture of him had created the opening. From the bench in the corner, Corporal Davis was no longer sitting. He had stood up at some point during the exchange, and he couldn't remember exactly when. He stared at the small man in the center of the mat, with an expression his face didn't quite know how to handle. A mix of confusion, respect, and the uncomfortable feeling of being wrong in front of witnesses. He said nothing. None of the 3 Marines did. Bruce Lee had not thrown a single damaging strike. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't shown off. He had simply moved with such honesty and efficiency that Diana's assumptions fell apart on their own. "You have real ability," Bruce told her quietly. Don't let the picture of your opponent become the ceiling of your imagination. Those words stayed with her. A little while later, Captain Stokes came back into the gym. Bruce had already thanked Diana with a small, sincere bow, picked up his bag, and left quietly through the same side door he had entered. Stokes found Diana still standing on the mat, working through everything that had just happened. "Did you get a chance to meet our guest?" Stokes asked. "The small guy," she said. "Chinese, civilian pass. Yeah. He didn't really introduce himself properly." Stokes looked at her for a long moment. "That was Bruce Lee," he said. Diana stood silent for what felt like forever. Then she turned and walked back to the heavy bag without another word. She didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon. But everyone who was there noticed the same thing. Every punch she threw after that moment was different, more patient, more honest. She wasn't just hitting the bag anymore, she was listening to it. Years later, in a 1987 Training Journal interview, someone asked Diana what she remembered most about that encounter. She said she remembered the 11 seconds of movement most clearly, those 5 or 6 clean exchanges, each one stripped of ego and done with terrifying efficiency. But what she carried with her for the rest of her life wasn't any specific technique. It was what Bruce said afterward. She wrote those words down that same night on a piece of paper and kept it in her wallet for 12 years, until the paper literally fell apart from being read so many times. Diana went on to become one of the first women to run hand-to-hand combat certification programs for military personnel. She told the story often, not as a tale of defeat, because she never saw it that way. She told it as a lesson about information, about what we lose when we decide we already know everything. She never saw Bruce Lee again. He passed away in July of 1973 at just 32 years old. Diana attended a civilian memorial in Los Angeles that autumn. She stood quietly in the back. She didn't speak to anyone. When it was over, she walked outside into the cool October air, brought her right fist to her left shoulder in a precise Marine salute, and held it there for a long moment. Then she lowered her hand and went home. The people who trained with her afterward said she was different, more patient, more willing to be wrong in the middle of a session, more interested in understanding than in winning. She had learned it all in 11 quiet minutes with a man she hadn't recognized at the time. Bruce Lee was never just fighting the person standing in front of him. He was fighting the assumption they brought into the room, and every single time the assumption lost. He had met that kind of quiet prejudice his whole life. Born in San Francisco in 1940 and raised in Hong Kong, he returned to the United States as a teenager. He faced closed doors, whispered doubts, and people who believed Asian men had limits placed on them before they even stepped onto the mat. Schools turned him away. Traditional masters told him certain knowledge wasn't for outsiders. When he taught anyone who came with real heart, he faced formal challenges. He didn't become bitter. He became more curious. He took everything apart and rebuilt it from the physics up. He asked questions most martial artists refused to ask. Not which style is best, but why do bodies move the way they do? What happens when you strip away everything that isn't absolutely true? What he created wasn't another style to argue about. It was Jeet Kune Do, a philosophy of honest, adaptable movement, water taking the shape of whatever container it entered. Not an answer, but a living question asked with the body. He was only 138 pounds, yet he could generate incredible power. A 1-inch punch that hit with over 350 pounds per square inch of force. 2-finger push-ups, crazy long holds with weights that made professional bodybuilders doubt their own eyes, reflexes so sharp they needed high-speed cameras to measure. None of it came from being born special. It came from being one of the greatest learners the world of physical training has ever seen. Notebooks full of observations, training logs, philosophical thoughts, diet notes and diagrams, the record of a man in constant conversation with what the human body could truly become. And underneath all the speed, science and discipline was something quieter. Bruce understood prejudice the way water understands stone. He had walked into rooms all over America and been underestimated with casual confidence. Instead of arguing with it, he demonstrated its absurdity so gracefully that the person doing the underestimating had no choice but to see the truth. Diana Holloway became one of his quiet advocates. In training rooms and military facilities throughout the 1970s, she told the story of the small Chinese man with the civilian pass who made her question everything she thought she knew about combat. She didn't name him for years, not until his name had grown so big that everyone already knew it. By then, saying it simply confirmed what people suspected. Muscle without understanding is just weight, and weight, as Diana learned that hot afternoon in 1972, can always be redirected. The real question, the one Bruce Lee lived inside every day, is this. What are you carrying that you've never truly questioned? What belief, what picture of yourself or others have you accepted because it seemed to fit and you never tested it? This story isn't really about Bruce Lee defeating a Marine sergeant. It's about what happens when someone gently, expertly, without landing a single damaging blow, helps you face your own assumptions, and what becomes possible once you set them down. Diana Holloway walked out of that gymnasium a better fighter, not because she had been beaten, but because she had been taught. And I believe every person who stays with a story like this until the end is capable of the same thing. If you made it all the way here, do one small thing for me. Drop a like on this video. It takes 2 seconds and tells the world that stories like this matter. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I put real care into every single one. Comment below with the words, "She saluted," so I know you were here until the end. This community means something to me. And if this story touched something in you, there's more where it came from. I put years of research into a book called The Bruce Lee Code, the actual training principles, philosophy, diet and discipline that made him who he was. It's not another fan book full of movie quotes. It's a practical guide for anyone serious about pushing their own limits, no matter their size or starting point. The link is in the description. You've just spent time with the depth of what Bruce Lee was really about. Keep asking better questions. Keep listening more than you assume. And remember, the most dangerous opponent is often the one you create in your own mind. See you in the next story.